into the nuts and bolts of this particular theme as we talk connected schools, this idea around holistic development in schools. And for this panel, we have a principal, and we also have a representative from Telkom, from the Telkom Foundation, and a number of other experts. So let me call up our panel, and please come and join us on the stage. First, let's kick off with Ms. Stephine Mashilo, Principal Stephine Mashilo, and she's the principal of MH Baloyi Secondary School in Winterveld. I'm so glad that you could join us today because Winterveld is past Pretoria, and her school is supported by the Telkom Foundation as part of the Connected Schools Initiative. And then we're also joined by Sarah Mthintso. Is Sarah here? Sarah, please come and join us. And she's the head of corporate social responsibility at Telkom, and her primary portfolio includes CSI and transformation. And then we have Ajit Gopalakrishnan joining us. He's the head of Odin Education, which set up an ecosystem at over 30,000, that's for over 30,000 learners across 6 provinces in South Africa. And then completing this panel is Dr. Mzamani Mdaka, and he's the Deputy National Education Program Manager in the NECT, responsible for Integrated District Improvements Program. So participating in this panel is not just our panelists, but you, of course. Just like we did yesterday, we are going to afford you time to ask your questions and make your comments. So please ready them and also jump onto the virtual platform just to express your thoughts. It's highly interactive for today. So go onto that platform and engage with other delegates. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How wonderful to have you all. I met some of you yesterday, so I'm really raring for this conversation. But Sarah, let me start with you, because there's been a transition over time, from where the Telkom Connected Schools Initiative started. So when you first engaged, you were supporting schools with ICT, but now you've expanded it, you've made it broader, it's a broader program. Just take us through that journey briefly.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So Telkom, through its foundation, has been very highly vested in education. And I guess we've learned along the way, and one of the key lessons we have had to take is the fact that there's no single intervention that can deliver the sort of outcomes we so envisage. And maybe to speak a bit about those outcomes, I think Shafika, who's our chairperson, has spoken quite in detail around what we do. The kind of outcomes we so desire as Telkom is to really produce a cadre of young people who are resilient, who have very strong academic performance, who are very futuristic in the way they think in terms of the careers and everything else that's futuristic. We also wanted to have a contribution to addressing some of the systemic challenges we are seeing in education. So make a contribution to teacher development, make a contribution to improving instructional leadership. And with that in mind, we realize that there's no single intervention that will get us to where we want to get to. And that's how we configured our strategy the way that we have. Shafika spoke briefly about a holistic approach, and our holistic approach is actually quite interesting. It puts the learner as our unit of change, and in so doing, we provide the learner with what we call academic support. We expose them to the use of ICT. We give them an opportunity to acquire digital skills, so your coding, your robotics. But importantly, we also offer psychosocial support. And I heard yesterday Vodacom was speaking quite extensively about the importance of psychosocial support. I think for us, we've learned that all those components actually collectively contribute to an impactful change that we so envisage. I think what is also important in just addressing the question is to say, yes, the learner must be supported in the way that we are supporting, but importantly, the teacher development component is important, the instructional leadership component is very important. So when we chose the path, we're quite deliberate because we realized that all these components in a holistic, integrated, cohesive manner will get us to where we want to get to. Yeah. And that's why we've moved away from just deploying technology, just putting computers in schools, but making sure that technology becomes an integrator, but embedded in that integration are these facets that I've spoken about.
Now, Mama Stephanie, let me hear from you, because your school, BH Baloyi Secondary School, is a school that is supported by the Telkom Foundation. What's it been like working with the foundation, and what effect has it had on your school?
Morning, everyone, and thank you, Asa, for the question. So, Telkom Foundation played a very important role in our school. In 2016, when they came in and introduced themselves and also gave us their vision and how they want to see our school changing and so forth, I was a bit worried. I was just acting principal, I think a month in the position, and here comes this big company that's telling me about big, I say always it's big English, because they were like saying all sorts of things. And I'm like, I'm just an acting principal here. What are they even talking about? So they are bringing in more computers. I think we do have online, offline computers somewhere in the school. So it didn't really make sense to me. But at the end of the day, the fact that I had to qualify for them to come to my school, whoever came up with the questions that were in that big booklet, Dr. Shafika, I suspect, I sat there and I responded to all the questions that they had there, and I was happy to be one of the 5 schools that made it to the team. What they did is they took us on step by step. They truly did their research, and they actually explained how this is supposed to help us and how we are going to benefit and how are we going to sustain this and so forth and so forth. So it helped me in various ways. One, I was acting principal, so I had to be the one that's buying into this whole thing. Yeah. So they gave support in that regard by providing enough space for me to explore what ICT is, how am I going to also use the offline, online computers that are somewhere in the yard and so forth, and also how to motivate teachers and also include parents to understand what the whole thing is all about, and ultimately putting the learners at the center to say, we are from we all know our township schools, socio-political issues, child-headed families, all that, poverty and so forth, and what is it that will attract our learners to believe in the program that is coming our way. So that was done like to the T. And finally, when the learners knew that this thing is coming our way, they were very excited. But what they did, they also worked on the infrastructure, like worked on the grade 8 classes, everything, from removing old tiles and whatnot, putting in smart boards, connectivity, laptops for teachers, tablets for learners, everything was in place. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, they also dealt with the matter of teachers, developing teachers to be able to confidently deal with whatever subject matter using technology. So Telkom did not only work, like they had partners, and those partners really knew what they were doing. In this instance, it was SchoolNet for us that actually helped us with development, and it's still helping us now. So we can safely say that we are not computer literate. I say to my teachers, we can't be computer literate working with Telkom Foundation. We are technologically advanced. So
You've been upgraded, yeah.
So that is how I try to motivate them, and SchoolNet is forever developing us. Even last week, I think 3 weeks back, almost 80% of our teachers at that point passed their Microsoft 21st Century Learning Design exam. So it shows that forever we are all forever learning, and we fitting into the technology vibe, because we were born before technology, so we like to believe. I don't know what that means. It's just us trying not to use technology effectively, so we hide behind that. But fortunately, we have young teachers who are also very helpful in assisting us whenever we are having problems. And then the most important one is psychosocial as well. I think most speakers spoke about it. You cannot come with a new thing when kids are hungry and they don't understand why you are there in the first place, because they are hungry. So psychosocial, it doesn't only assist us with the learners, but we have seen it helping the community as well, because at any given time, the parent will come and say, "Ma'am, can I see the social worker?" And for me, it's a win, because we are utilizing the resources for the community that we are serving. So those are some of the things that really are still helpful for us even to date.
Oh, grateful for those stories. Wow. So Mzamani, let me come to you, because whole school development has been a priority for NECT and KST, right? You have had great success in developing full school systems. Just give us details on just the general approach on how it's impacted the schooling system.
Thank you, and morning to everyone. NECT creates a platform for collaboration and look at ways in which we can then be able to assist specifically the system on how to improve learning outcomes. So initially we brought in some lead agents like businesses. We collaborated with businesses like Deloitte, PwC, and we then went into schools. We had about 324 schools that we're piloting with in Limpopo and the Eastern Cape. So when we get into a school, we then looked at the levels of support that needs to be provided. Right. Firstly, you get into the classroom, and following the instructional core, you've got teachers that must be supported in terms of their pedagogical skills, in terms of their curriculum interpretation. You also have the curriculum itself that needs also to be interpreted. So we assisted that in coming up with the structured pedagogy system or the programs. And also you look at learners themselves, they need to be assisted in terms of their welfare, their well-being, and all aspects that they need, so that they have a conducive environment for learning. And then you move out of the classroom, you look at the school itself. You're saying you have the management who must also be assisted in terms of capacitating them. They should have become courageous leaders so that they are able to take decisions, even if though some of the decisions are so hard, they need to do that. They need to be able to use data that they are coming out of the system, out of the learner reports, so that they are able to program and adjust their programs in terms of teaching. They also have some other aspects that we were supporting them. So we had to support school management teams so that they are doing their work correctly. And also in terms of curriculum management, so that they are able to manage what is happening in classroom and also be able to assist correctly. So beyond that, you look at the school. You don't look only at the school management teams. We said there are parents in the school. Where you have your SGBs. So we come up with modules where we assisting parents, because parents, like we were saying, children are national assets. So parents also want their children to succeed. But the challenge was they know how of supporting these learners. What is it that parents should do to correctly support learners without undoing what teachers are doing in class? Yeah. Because if we don't look at that component, parents can also work against what teachers are doing in the class. So we had some models where we taking parents on board on how they can be able to support. And at the same time, you also have the districts, which are supposed to provide monitoring, provide support to teachers. So we're able to capacitate your subject advisors, your second managers on their roles, so that then it becomes a collaborative effort in assisting the schools. And it worked out so nicely. All those schools were going forward and they were producing best results. However, when you're working on that platform, you realize that you're starting to produce pockets of excellence. These schools that are getting supported, they're able to progress and excel in whatever you're doing. But then that then brought the idea that if you have uncoordinated support, you are as well also disruptive into the system. So we then moved to looking at strengthening the system. Like Dr. Nikki said in a slide, system strengthening precedes system transformation. Before we can transform, let's look at how then do we support the system. We strengthen the system so that the system can then be able to continuously, sustainably provide improvement at the school level. Because if you focus on learners, I mean, these learners are in grade 11 this year. Next year, they are grade 12. They are out of the system. It means you must then start afresh with those that are coming in, and that is not sustainable. So we then coming up with a program of integrated district improvement program, where we're looking at the district as a unit of analysis. How can we strengthen the districts? How can we capacitate the districts to make sure that if districts are functional, our belief is that if districts are functional, they will be able to support schools to become functional. And when schools are functional, then we'll be able to achieve our learning outcome goals.
Yes.
We'll be able to get quantity and quality of our learning outcomes. So we're looking at that and say, how then do we strengthen the districts to be able to provide the necessary support, the monitoring, the feedback loop, so that they don't just go there and tick boxes and look at things being done. But what are you learning from the monitoring processes? What are you learning? What is the feedback that you are bringing back into the system so that the system is able to improve? So that's what we are looking at now. And if we do it that way, we'll be able to address what Dr. Nick was talking about, the retirement wave.
Right.
If the district is well functional, they will be able to plan. They will be able to know how many teachers are moving out of the system in 5 years. How many are they now preparing through your bursaries, your Funza Lushaka, and all those things? How many are they putting in the system so that as and when X number is going out, Y number is coming in? So that's how we are looking at it now, and that's how we are looking at the system, so that we ensure that the system can become sustainable and the system can become functional. If districts are functional, they will produce functional schools, and we then will be able to have targeted improvements in terms of learning at the systemic level.
But the picture you've painted as well, it just gives us a sense of how important partnership is, because these are partnerships across different levels, across different sectors and parts of society, all working towards one effort. So I think that's such a great example. Ajit, let me come to you, because you represent Odin Education, and you are focused on the future classroom. Just give us a sense on how that future looks like. What does the future classroom look like?
Yeah, so Sarah, firstly, thank you for the opportunity. It's really great to meet everyone here. I think this is a fantastic conference. And also a small correction, I wish we had 30,000 on our network. We've got 3,000.
3,000, okay.
So I was sitting here half debating whether I should correct you or not. And I was like, actually, let's
truth
just,
should always prevail.
Let's be frank, yeah. So we're a tech company, and to use your words, ecosystem is a big English word, and it, we're very much around. So how do you do an ecosystem? Yeah, because it sounds great. Partnerships sound great, but actually, how do corporates actually partner to make a difference, and how can you actually do that? So we are very focused, and we think the future of education is like this. We think the private sector actually needs to lead the change in education. We know that economic transformation across the globe, it doesn't matter what region you take, has always been led by the private sector. And we need to, as a private sector, understand that, because we are the ones that can react quickly enough and change quickly enough, and then create the models that for the public sector to follow. So a little bit building on what Nikki was saying previously.
Yes.
So how does that look in a digital environment? So what we've done is we've focused on saying, interventions in schools are way too expensive for private companies. Because there's so much more than just the one particular thing that you want to achieve. You've got to worry about hardware. You've got to worry about connectivity. You've got to worry about security. You've got to worry about, the right user profiling. Just logging everyone on and managing the admin of a user profile is massive, right? And then you've got to worry about tech support. What happens if my hardware fails? Who do I call? What happens if it's stolen? How does it get replaced, etc.? And so what's happening is when a company wants to make an intervention in a school, they have to worry about so much more than what they actually want to be focusing on. So we see that as a huge opportunity to create a digital infrastructure that companies can plug into, where some of their spend will be towards the infrastructure, but a lot of their spend can be towards the intervention that they are focused on. I was fascinated by the conversation earlier where, businesses can no longer see the intervention that they want to make as a feel-good project or at best case a marketing project. It has to actually make an impact on their business. So the model that Mary Jane spoke about where Tiger Foods is actually teaching children to develop to grow the product that can augment the meal that they're going to sell from a process perspective. That's fascinating because that skill at a kid level benefits the child, but also benefits Tiger brand. So I think companies need to be in that space. But the model that exists now doesn't allow that because when a company wants to do that, they have to worry about connectivity or child security when surfing the internet. So a very practical example, maybe the best way to do it is to explain how we've done it. So one of our partners, VW, was very focused on STEM because STEM is really critical to the kind of skills they want to pull from the community. And so they partnered with a fantastic organization called MobiTutor, who has a whole program on an online program, an app, and they do tutoring and so on, and they wanted to deploy that. The problem is, to get a child to have a device connectivity, to have security, to have it dedicated so that they can log on and get into that is a massive issue. So we said, we went to them and we said, look, we want to make your intervention much more successful by providing you the infrastructure. Take some of your spend and contribute to the infrastructure, and some of your spend run this program. And you know what? There's a school where the infrastructure has already been contributed to by Standard Bank who are interested in financial literacy. Because obviously the more financial literate learners are, the more they will own bank accounts and that will happen. And by the way, there's SJM who has a automotive manufacturing factory there, and they're very, very interested in actually hand skills. So all of these companies are actually driving their initiatives on a digital infrastructure. So the best example to look at it is, if all the apps on your phone had to have hardware, had to have connectivity, had to have this, they wouldn't be profitable. So what did Apple or Android do? They created an ecosystem, a digital ecosystem that you can plug into and access the consumer, or in this case, the learner, the beneficiary, and make a difference. And so we want to be that Apple store for making an impact in society.
Sarah, I want your views on that. Do you think companies should try and develop, a whole school support program themselves, like Telkom has? Or do you think that they should work together with other companies so that they can fund different elements? What are the pros and cons that come to mind?
Yeah, so I think the starting point for me is that the challenges we have in our education system are quite deep. And I think it would be difficult for one company to say, I can solve the challenges, the systemic challenges we have in our education system. So in my view, I think collaboration is very, very important. But in collaborating, we have to be very deliberate, very authentic in our ways of collaborating. I think part of the problem we tend to see, and that's just in the nature of corporates, we always want to have our flags fly the highest. If I'm a blue brand, I want to be above the red and above the yellow. But in this space, we need to find a way of collaborating because the vision is shared. So if you think about the education space, we are in the high school space, so we're working quite a lot with children who are in high school. And part of the challenge we face is that when children are sent to higher grades, for example, in mathematics, we find that they struggle and they struggle a lot. And what we need to be doing is we need to be saying, but hold on, who works in the ECD space
the
that can
foundational
help
years.
us understand what the challenges are and what interventions are being put in place? We are finding ourselves doing remediation because there is nobody in our space that's doing that kind of work in ECD. So children are struggling with maths. We are finding that when they get to grade 9, their ability is sitting at grade 4. And that's partly because the education system is having its own challenges, but also we're not collaborating enough to say, by the time we come to grab those learners in grade 8, we know that Organization X has done their bit in foundational areas. So my view is that there is no single entity that can claim to have the ability nor the resources to go at it alone. We do need to collaborate, but we must be authentic in our collaborative efforts.
Yes.
So Sarah, if I could just build on that, and I think that also comes from a little bit about what Nikki was talking about, is we need an infrastructure, again, that is constantly understanding the learners, right? An infrastructure that universities can plug into to understand, okay, what is the intervention needed here by learner, not okay as a whole, but by learner. So again, I mean, even if it's not us, I really encourage this thinking of saying, where is a system where I can plug in and understand what's happening there and understand where I can add value to that society. So give an example. We've set up a tech support system. 70% of the tech support requests are for content. So please, can you send me, the last year's maths paper, and we send it. But 30% is psychosocial. Yeah. And that, a child will come to us and saying, I'm feeling depressed. I don't know what to do with that. Yeah, there are qualified people who will be funded by private companies who can support that. Do you understand? So for me, it's like, right, I want to be able to contact companies and say, right, I've got this data. I can tell you which child in which school has this problem. Who's out there? Put your hand up to actually be the expert to solve that.
Yeah.
And the problem is, unless you've got that system, you can't share this knowledge and you can't share what is happening. Like, you have invaluable learnings on what is the challenge, on how to deploy. Why should Vodacom start from zero on that same journey?
Right. I want to come to the floor now, and I actually want to get your perspective, but I want to prepare our delegates in the room because our ushers are ready with the mics. So please indicate to them with a show of hands if you have a comment or a question. Our ushers are ready. Do we have comments from the floor? The ushers will head your way. So please, with an indication of hands, put your hand up so that we can afford you time to participate in this panel. So, Mzamani, in the meantime, while we ready the room, what do you think? What do you think we should do to ensure that partnerships for holistic school development for this process are designed in a way that is beneficial to the school and the learners, and not disruptive, as you were saying earlier?
Yeah, thanks a lot. If you listen to what he has just said now, is that we've got private companies that are willing to support schools. And they take a journey to go and find out how can they support schools. Meanwhile, we have a system. I mean, you have your system starting from national, provinces, district, and the school level. If we use the district as a leverage point, where all the partners will come and say, we are going to support schools in maths, tell us which are the schools that are most in need. And the district will be able to identify and say, in terms of our prioritization, we're prioritizing numeracy, reading, and what, and this, and you've got 10 that are putting their efforts in assisting in numeracy. And we feel, because the problem, the way I'm looking at it, the problem is only in programming and planning.
Okay.
Because we come as, let's say, company A will go to a school B, do 1, 2, 3 that they are doing, and then company B comes, wants to do the same thing. There is no trail of, so we keep on reinventing the wheel. Mm-hmm. So we're proposing that if we can have an integrated district improvement program, wherein all the efforts that we want to put, we put them there. If I'm blue, like she was saying, I must go in there, mix with my red and my green, and then it will also provide an opportunity for partners to sit back and say, are we really making an effort? Mm-hmm. Is it worthwhile the way we are doing? Because sometimes you find the partners, they've got the money, but they don't have the know-how of delivering. So if it's put in one basket, which is the district will be able to say, we have this company who are expertise in ICT infrastructure build-up. We have company X expert in ICT software, so they can pull all of them, put them together and say, this is where we want to go. How then do we go together? Because as a pact, it will be easy to plan and find out ways of going further and finding ways of monitoring and looking at whether the implementation needs to be adjusted. But if we go directly to schools, we are likely, you likely to find schools that are performing well, getting more funders.
Yes.
So those schools that have got best grade 12 results, you find that school has about 5 funders. But next to that school, there is a school that is very, very in a dire need of support. And no one is going there, because if we associate ourselves with that school, our flag is not going to fly high. Yes. So we also need to look at that, and we're proposing that let's strengthen the districts to be able to deal with policy and programming. Yes. Because it's only at the policy and programming level that we'll be able to make sure that our system becomes very functional.
Yes, I think Nikki put it as what, look at me philanthropy, that we need to stop look at me philanthropy and remember exactly why we're doing what we're doing. Yes, Ma'am Stephine.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the impact that collaboration does, when they come to our schools. Because it's different companies with special and different qualities and contributions, it is very fruitful for us as a school to know that when we're having a challenge with teacher development, we know exactly who is here for, the time that we'll give this specific partner, although it's Telkom that brought the partner to us, but we don't find ourselves having to explain ourselves to Telkom why SchoolNet is forever developing teachers in one thing or the other. And also, we also have leadership programs for learners. Remember, we said learners are first. So we have leadership sessions for learners as well. For example, in this instance, we have Columba leadership, whereby the very basics of leaderships are taught at an early stage to learners, so that by the time they get to this level, they're not starting from scratch.
Yeah.
They already know the values of awareness. We were talking about green economy and whatnot, awareness of yourself and nature, and focus, and being of service to others. All these things that we're talking about in this conference, already at my school from grade 8 already, we have learners who are already being trained to deal with all those. So the benefits are very impressive, because then you also, the relationship goes beyond. For example, it's been 5 years. Those learners, I must say, and I must thank Telkom Foundation for really in front of everyone for assisting us, because for the first time, our results, we at first when I started, we were struggling with results, but with the intervention and whatnot, the results started improving. We were at 95 and then 93, and then COVID happened. But the difference between these cohort of learners that Telkom Foundation started with is the quality of results. So for the first time, I can go to the director and say, no, I don't have a problem with mathematics. No, my technical mathematics and tech maths and tech physics, they're doing well. So it's because of all the interventions. So the impact is quite huge. And by extension, the other partner then looks at taking these learners to tertiary and also following up on them and seeing to it that they perform well at varsity. So the impact is very diverse and very huge. So it shouldn't be about competition, but collaboration.
Yes.
And at all times, the partners need to know what are we all doing. So they meet regular meetings, and so that you look at what you got right and what you need to improve on. So I just wanted to chip in on the impact that collaboration has on schools.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Ajit?
Yeah, Sarah, I actually, whilst I agree a lot with kind of some of the topics discussed, I really want to come from a business angle here. Businesses have core functions. Yeah, and the business environment is really hard going forward. Yeah, so we have to rethink, and I think Trialogue has really understood this. Yeah, is that we have to rethink CSI as having to add to the bottom line. Unless you do that, it's not going to be scalable. Yeah, so. And what I'm really encouraged by the way, and I just want to give you an anecdote here. In 2 years ago, the government took an incredibly progressive step in introducing robotics and programming into the curriculum.
Yes.
Yeah, that was 2 years ago, and they introduced it at grades 1 to 3, and there's a 7-year rollout plan that goes to to get it up to grade 12. Earlier this year, Andrej Karpathy, who was the head of the autonomous driving program at Tesla, said that 80% of his code is now self-generated. So within 2 years, a highly progressive curriculum step is now obsolete.
Yeah.
So I really, so I really want to let that sink in. And so what we have to do is we have to really understand that the interventions in the education system has to be helping companies navigate this incredibly challenging dynamic environment. Do you understand? So, I mean, I was on a panel last week, and we had Siemens, Claudia Renaud, who's the head of Siemens in the region, and he said that actually he doesn't care that they know how to do a PLC programming. He wants kids with, stick-it attitude.
Right.
The attention deficit disorder is a massive issue now. Kids want to be promoted after 2 months. They don't actually want to stay and get it done. Yeah. So he argued on the panel, and I was inspired by it, that it's a lot more about attitude than actual particular skill, because companies will teach that skill to a kid that is, relatively logical, relatively can process sort of thoughts. So companies need to say, right, what are we looking for? And I love this leadership. Columba Academy is fantastic because companies are looking for leadership. So how do we put leadership into schools, right? You know, and what I think companies should look at, what do I need? Because remember, ultimately, education is about actuating the child. And the way to actuate the child is sustainable, dignified employment. Yeah? And who's providing the employment in the country? Private sector.
Yeah.
And I tell you now, government will follow. A government will follow. But maybe slightly different to the model that was put up where you've got sailboats and this huge Titanic ship.
Yeah.
What we should do is, I don't know if you've seen any of those ships, how they get into the harbor. They have these tugboats that bash them left and right, and they like move them as they kind of navigate into the harbor. So I think private sector has to be those tugboats that really is, challenging the status quo, understanding what they need and getting those interventions right happening in the school, but in a sense that they can then tell their shareholders is making a difference on their bottom line.
Right. So the model is not just one directional.
Yes.
It's flowing out of the big
it's about
ship, but it's
what's in it for me. And I'm sorry, I disagree with, if we go with, we have to change our hat, it won't survive in the business world.
right.
You have to say as a private company, what's in it for me? What do I need? I need children with incredible attitude and who are savvy in certain environments. And where can I go get that? And how do I support a system that is actually going to be able to do that? Right. So okay. I'm quite the opposite. I don't think we have decades. I think we have 6 months to keep changing.
I wonder who's agile enough in the room, who has a program, who can design or bring about a partnership that's going to respond to this agility. We've got questions on the floor. We've got 10 minutes or so let's try and be brief with our comments or question. Any hands? There we go.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. This is perhaps less of a question and more of a comment. My name is Mandisa Matobela and I'm from UNICEF, and it's been fantastic to listen in on the conversation today. I want to perhaps challenge back to the last comments made by the speaker, particularly in the sense that we're having this conversation. We've just had this brilliant presentation from Dr. Nikki. If we think of the role of the private sector as growing share of wallet and competing in this excessively difficult business environment, we fail to see the bigger picture of the fact that we're all living in a very difficult national environment. We live in an incredibly difficult South Africa, and it's hard to program. It's hard to reach the most rural and the most remote communities in this country. And when we're all chasing these scorecards or these KPI indicators that are all green, the board members are not in the room today, I'm hoping. We actually need to have an honest conversation to say, if all of our KPIs and all of our indicators are green, then there's something that's not working. Perhaps to the point of the NEC director, maybe we're only then in the quintile 5 and 6 schools. Maybe the only reason that all of our indicators are working is because we're not doing the very difficult work of going to the most remote communities to reach the most remote areas, of rolling up our sleeves and doing more of the work. I fully support an ecosystem model, and I think it can work, but I also don't think that it should discredit the very difficult challenge that we should put to business to say, it's hard. There is no silver bullet solution yet. We just haven't found it. And we probably haven't found it because it doesn't exist. I also want to challenge this notion of the tugboats, particularly because of the presentation that we saw this morning. 90% of the work is ensuring that we have a stable education system, and that work is being done by the state. We need to be enabling to the work that's being done by incredibly talented and competent university professors, educators, and the state that ideally would like to build a functioning South Africa, but because of the issues and the challenges that we have, we need to admit that it's difficult. And there are resources and tools that can make it easier, thank goodness, particularly for technology. But as you rightfully said, technology is evolving as quickly as the curriculum is being put in front of the learners. So what do we do about the students that are left behind? Because if businesses are also serious about growing, they need to realize that the 50% of this country that's not economically participating is actually the market share of the future. And so if we can get them educated, if we can get them competent, if we can get them economically participating, they're all your new customers.
Right.
That's the solution to all of the challenges. And so I think as we have this conversation and we look at the brilliant work that's being done by the Telkom Foundation and the Vodacom Foundation, we need to close that gap and respond to the challenge that Dr. Nikki put to us this morning to say, how are we sharing one another's lessons? How are we making sure that we're not repeating the same mistakes? How are we inviting our educators and our monitoring and evaluating professionals into the processes right at the beginning so that we can build these incredible theory of changes that work collaboratively to save South Africa and not save business or save non-profits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah,
A powerful comment. Yes.
I have to just make one comment, and I think we're more on the same side of the table than you might think. We got hacked by a student in Fourie Smith. Okay? Anyone know where Fourie Smith is? It's a town at the end of a 100-kilometer cul-de-sac.
100 kilometers?
Okay? It's in the middle of nowhere. So don't get me wrong. I think we don't have a shortage of talent in South Africa, and I'm saying this from experience, not just goodwill. There is incredible talent for companies in the most rural areas of this country. What I'm saying is, to unlock that talent, businesses have to see the opportunity in that talent. To make it scalable in this country, I'm on your side. To make it scalable in this country, we have to shift paradigms from, I'm helping you, to, wow, you have so much potential, how can you help me? Yeah? And how can I help you or can provide you the tools that will make you a leader in my organization? So we're on the same side. I'm not discrediting, and by the way, I'm not an expert, so I'm happy to be challenged. But what I really want to drive here is that and especially with the changing environment, the skills that our kids have, you don't have to teach them to use a tablet. Put it in their hands, come back a week later. They will show you things about it. And that is irrespective of the background that they're in. So do our teachers need to learn those digital skills, or do they need to learn to support them and encourage them and make sure that they're safe and make sure that they have an infrastructure and can put them in touch with companies that are looking for them, actually? So I'm stirring the pot on purpose, guys. I'm really not meant to be disrespectful in any shape or form. I have worked with the government. Every school that we deploy in is a public sector school. Yeah? It's just that we've got to change paradigms and say, I really believe Africa can lead the world in the education. We don't have to catch up, we can lead, because I can guarantee everyone is grappling with what is the future of education meant to look like.
Right.
And by the way, we have the youth. We are going to power the global economy going forward.
Yeah, that was
so
a strong
why don't
point
we lead?
that came up yesterday, absolutely. Some of the comments coming in on our virtual platform, one says the point about the generation of teachers retiring is spot on. Teacher development efforts are not practical if 80% of the teachers in that school are 60 years and over. That one coming from Linda Pangwa on the virtual platform. Another one says, we may not all be psychosocial, but we can all learn how to be trauma-informed, to assess and identify trauma in the system and ourselves, acts in a way that do not re-traumatize scholars. I really would like to bring the trauma-informed school discourse into this discussion. Perhaps maybe it's something that can be looked at in a different program, or even later, right, when we go into our breakaways. That might be an opportunity. And then another one says that this one comes from Veloshni Singh, Chemistry in Action. And it says, while I totally agree with the digital learning that it's very important, what about the practical learning? What is better, a learner doing their own science experiment versus watching a YouTube video and having the teacher read out the experiment? These are all things that this kind of topic, this discussion raises. But because we're out of time, I think it's going to be the breakaways then become an important forum for these details to be attended to. So I want to thank our panel. Thank you very much. It was quite robust there in the end, but as I said, there is a further platform where these issues can be taken up. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.